Hey, Dave here with Zilog and Moto. And as we teased last week, we're going to be taking a look at two exclusive games released on the Sega Genesis Mini, Tetris and Darius. I thought about doing separate reviews for both of these games, without actually having actual boxes and manuals to look at for the games. And especially with one of the games being Tetris, I didn't think I would really be able to make a decent full-length video if I split it into two. So you get a 2-for-1 deal today on Zilog and Moto. And I guarantee you back twice your money if you're not completely satisfied. Now, when discussing the Sega Genesis Mini, while Tetris and Darius are the special titles included in the release, they certainly aren't the only rarities. If you're not familiar with the Mini's game lineup, it contains a set of 40 Genesis titles, plus Tetris and Darius, for a total of 42. Of those other 40, most of the games were available for sale in the United States, although some are somewhat hard to find these days, such as Phantasy Star 4 and Beyond Oasis. But 3 of those 4 are fairly special in their own right. Super Fantasy Zone, the last game in the Fantasy Zone series, was originally only released in Europe and Japan, so it's making its first appearance in the US as part of this set. Mega Man Wily Wars was available in the US, but only briefly, as it was a game exclusive to the Sega Channel, Sega's cable-based game delivery service for the Genesis. And due to the limited access of cable internet at the time, this release marks the first time that most in the US will be able to play it. And finally, Monster World 4, the final game in the original Wonder Boy Monster World series, sees an English translation on the Genesis for the first time. As at the time of release in 1994, it was only available in Japan, and it would stay that way until Sega translated it for the Wii Virtual Console in 2012. For all of those games, I'll eventually be doing separate reviews, due to the scopes of those games, and due to the fact that I would like to eventually have complete copies of the European Super Fantasy Zone and Wily Wars, and a Japanese copy of Monster World 4 to go along with the reviews. Getting a non-pirated copy of Wily Wars will be difficult, as it's a pretty expensive title, but hey, it's certainly not the only rare title on my want list. Having said all that, let's get back to the two titles we're taking a look at today, Tetris and Darius. Tetris has a strange history on the Genesis. Well, technically it has no history on the Genesis. But in 1998, Sega obtained a license to release a version of Tetris in arcades using their System 16 arcade setup. It was also used for numerous other arcade titles that would be ported to the Genesis. Sega, thinking their license also covered a home version of the title in Japan, prepared a Mega Drive version of the game. But after finding out there were significant issues with the license, halted production of the game and destroyed existing stock. As a result, Tetris is by far the rarest title for the Mega Drive Genesis, with reportedly less than 10 copies in existence, and only 4 currently publicly claimed. Now, the Tetris that's included on the Mini isn't exactly that version of the game. It's still an interesting curiosity that we'll take a closer look at in a minute. As far as Darius is concerned, Darius never had any release on a Genesis or Mega Drive in any shape or form. From all reports, the Darius presented here started out life as a homebrew game from a hobbyist programmer named Hydecade. This project got the attention of M2, the company responsible for the Genesis Mini. Through details that haven't really been made clear, M2 either helped Hydecade finish the game, or bought the project from Hydecade and finished it for themselves outright, for the inclusion of the project, possibly with help from Square Enix, who holds the rights to the Taito properties currently. So, 2 effectively brand new games that no one has ever seen before, at least in this format. Are they any good? Possibly worth purchasing a Mini for? Well, let's take a look. So you've probably seen this box a million times by now over the last few weeks, assuming you're watching this video in the fall of 2019. And yes, this is the very same box I threw across the room in the last video. Just to give you an idea of the size of this box, here is the Super Nintendo Mini box next to it. And as you can see, it's pretty much, it's the same. It's a little, tiny bit shorter, and then I don't know, about 1.5 inches on this side. But other than that, it's still small. And then also here, again for scale, here's a copy of Sonic the Hedgehog. So it's just slightly shorter than a standard Sega clamshell box. Inside the box is a manual, a USB power adapter, a micro USB cable, an HDMI cable, 2 USB 3-button Genesis controllers, and the Mini itself. I'm not going to bother to open it up because I'm sure there's plenty of other unboxing videos out there, and frankly, I've already hooked it up and started using it, so it seemed a bit silly to put everything back in the box. But anyway, speaking of all that, here is the Mini itself. And then for a size comparison, and again, I'm sure you've probably already seen this as well, but there is my modded, my region modded Genesis that I keep around for, special videos. And as you can see, it's a pretty dang accurate representation of the original Model 1 Genesis. Only minor nitpick. The red here seems a slightly different color than the red on the original Model 1. But, that could also be 30 years of age. I mean, who knows? It's almost a silly thing to even point out. So anyway. And of course, you've got your front USB ports for your controllers, your micro USB, and your HDMI right there. Also, here's a hot tip for you. So, as you can see, I mentioned the micro USB, and it's pretty common having micro USB to power things. That's what you use to power your Super NES Classic and your NES Classic. Neo Geo Classic actually uses USB-C, which I thought was pretty nice and interesting and flexible because the controllers use it as well. But a lot of these use these type of ports. Well, you may think, wait a minute, I probably have that port laying around somewhere, and if you have a Xbox One, you probably do have an Xbox One charging cable hooked up to your TV and your Xbox. Well, you could just use that free Xbox One charging cable when you're not using it to charge a controller and use it to power your Mini, and save yourself having an extra cable running around your entertainment center. I use that same method for the NES and the Super NES Mini, and it all works pretty well. Let's see, now I'm going to flip this over on the back. And the back has pictures of all the games included, with Echo and Castle of Illusion getting singled out up in the upper left-hand corner for some reason. I'm not sure why those two specifically got picked out. And then Darius and Tetris, which is the two games we're talking about on today's videos, up here over to the right as being bonus titles. And, I guess they were singled out as bonus titles just because they're new and they didn't exist before this. Now, obviously, if you look close, the Wily Wars and where is it? I'm actually drawing a blank now. I know this is a great video. Oh, yeah, right next to it. Duh. The Monster World 4 cover. Obviously, those two were mocked up for this box. Because those games never were released in the United States. So there never would be a reason to have a Genesis branded cover for those games. But the rest of these are all great representations of the original covers, and I love seeing all this artwork on the box as opposed to just a boring list of games. which they could have easily done with so many titles being included on the console. One last thing is I'm going to point out as I flip this box to the bottom is, if you see this URL here, this genesismini.sega.com, this URL is very important. Why is it important? Well, as I said, the Mini comes with a small manual, but really it only regards the console itself and doesn't get into the actual manuals for the various games. If you want game manuals, you're going to have to visit that website, and it has both web versions and PDFs you can download for all 42 games. I would strongly recommend going there and downloading all the PDFs and just storing them somewhere, because who knows how long Sega will keep that website active for. And the PDF versions of the manuals are good. Maybe not exact copies of the original manuals, but for instance, I looked at the manual for Streets of Rage 2, and the contents of the manual look pretty close to the original one, and will certainly give you all the information you need for basic gameplay. And that's the Sega Genesis Mini. I didn't get into crazy attention to detail that this thing has, or the Tower Power add-on that Sega is selling in Japan, primarily because, again, I'm sure tons of others have already done that, and my Tower of Power doesn't get here for a few more weeks. So, without further ado, let's go and get to the games. I'm going to start out talking about Tetris because, well, there's just less to talk about. If you're not familiar with Tetris, and if you're not, you've not only been living under a rock, but an entire mountain, Tetris is a puzzle game that has its origins going back to 1984 when it was designed by Russian software designer Alexei Pajitnov. The game was ported everywhere due to its popularity, but it's probably most well known as being the pack-in game for the Nintendo Game Boy, where it was the perfect release on a black and white system. The game works so well on many platforms due to its simplicity. Tetris is a puzzle game where a block-based game board is presented to the player, and puzzle pieces, called tetraminos, as I just learned this week, are dropped onto the board from the top of the screen and float down to the bottom. The goal is to fit the puzzle pieces together in such a way that they complete a line on the board. If you leave a gap, the pieces will remain in place on the board, and then they will start to stack on top of one another. Fill up the board with puzzle pieces and it's game over, so it's in your best interest to complete as many lines as possible, not only to score points, but to keep the game going. Also, one last thing, the game will speed up the more lines you complete to add challenge of getting a high score. Back to the game as presented here. Based on what I've been able to gather about the aborted original port of Tetris on the Mega Drive, there's some give and take going on with this version on the Mini. Why is that? Well, for whatever reason, there may have been licensing issues that still would have needed contending with in the case of the original port and developer Mirrorsoft. So instead of M2 recreating Mirrorsoft's original effort, they reported Sega's original arcade version of Tetris, hence the difference between the two. While I think this version is more graphically appealing, specifically with how the Tetris pieces look, it's now a direct port of the arcade game with no added extras, hence the give and take I referred to. So instead of having a time trial mode and having the option to turn on a special item mode, where you could attain special pieces that would cause certain things to happen on the game board, Tetris on the Mini leaves you with only two modes, a basic single-player mode and a two-player mode. The single-player mode is pretty much what you would expect and what I described previously. There are 4 difficulty levels that you can set, but you're still just trying to make an entrance onto the high score list. Two-player mode is essentially the same game, but with 2 players competing at the same time, while being given the same puzzle pieces in order. Graphically, this game is an accurate representation of the arcade original. However, that's not really a good thing, as the original arcade game is fairly plain. Rather than have the game boards appear just on a plain black or any other colored background, Sega chose to include random digitized pictures as the backgrounds. Which is fine, but there doesn't really seem to be any rhyme or reason to the backgrounds, and they don't appear to be digitized very well. Granted, you probably won't be spending much time looking at the backgrounds when playing the game, but the whole thing just seems odd, and if they were redoing the port from scratch, I don't see why M2 didn't just opt to clean this up. Also, there's a CGI monkey that appears on the screen for no apparent reason, and it'll react as you play the game. So, that's nice, I guess? It appears to be from the arcade version as well, so I can't complain too much about arcade authenticity on a port, but the whole thing seems unnecessary. The in-game sound is a bit of a problem as well, in that there's not very much of it. There's one song that gets looped over and over and over again. It speeds up in places to go along with the action of the game, but it's still the same song. I'm assuming the arcade version also only had one music track, but this would have been a perfect time to mix it up a bit, as they did nothing. Sound effects in the game are minimal and are limited just when pieces are dropped and the lines are cleared. And no, I didn't notice any specific audio lag when playing the game. I'm not saying it's not there, just saying that I didn't hear/notice it. So, without having the extra modes that were in the original port and literally nothing else added to the game, I'm giving this version of Tetris 2 stars. It's a competent version of Tetris and it plays well and supports 2 players, but this game could have been so much more. And it was so much more, which is kind of frustrating when a 30-year-old ROM has more features than what we have instead in 2019. And the bare bonesness of this port are even more glaring when taken in consideration to our next game. Well, on to Darius. Darius originated from a very unique arcade shooter that was released by Taito in 1987. And when I say unique, I mean unique. Darius was released as a 3-monitor arcade game that provided an extra wide playfield to the players. This same setup was also used by Taito for Ninja Warriors and in some places for Darius 2. And if you get a chance, you should definitely check out one of these machines. They're really spectacular to look at. Luckily, I live close to Galloping Ghost Arcade in Brookfield, Illinois, and I've been able to see both Darius and Ninja Warriors up close, and they live up to the billing. The extreme wideness of the screen put together does hurt gameplay a little bit, as it's impossible to take in the full screen at one time, but that's a minor complaint for how much of a technical achievement it is. Being that the game was originally released in 1987, it was a bit early to be ported to US 16-bit consoles, but did make several appearances on the PC Engine, which makes sense as the PC Engine / TurboGrafx 16 is known for having some great shooters. And it was also ported to various 16-bit computers in Europe. The port shrunk down the playfield to one screen, as would be expected, and this new conversion is no different. Well, it's slightly different, in that it's a huge 32 megabit ROM. To put that in comparison, the port of Sega Darius 2 that was released for the Genesis in 1991 was only 8 megabits. What did they manage to include in that 32 megabits? Well, to me, it appears they included everything possible, including 15 new bosses that didn't exist in the original game. Along with the original version of the game, the port also includes a boss rush mode where you can attempt to fight all the bosses in a game in a row. Also, the storyline for the arcade version involves 2 pilots, Proco and Tiat, and you can choose to play as either pilot in this port, and in doing so, essentially switch between normal difficulty and easy difficulty. More on that later. Finally, the programmers decided to be benevolent and allow a built-in rapid fire feature, and believe me, you'll need it. I don't know who would be psycho enough to play this game without rapid fire being turned on, but you can turn it off if you would like, perhaps if you have a controller that has its own rapid fire capabilities. I compared what you see here in the mini port with what was available on the PC Engine Hue card, Darius Plus, and the PC Engine CD-ROM, Super Darius, just to get an idea of how this port compares on era-specific hardware, and the mini version is leaps and bounds ahead of both of those. Graphically, both PC Engine versions are colorful and resemble the arcade version. However, the Genesis Mini version seems to have more frames of animation and just feels like a smoother experience. Also, from an audio standpoint, the Genesis Mini version is very close to the arcade version and matches up well with the PC Engine CD-ROM version, with the Hue card version having much poorer representation of the game's soundtrack, as to be expected due to different hardware and having a ROM size that's only a quarter of the Genesis Mini. The concept of Darius and how the game plays is interesting. It's certainly not your average horizontal shooter. Whether you choose to play as Proco or Tiat, you pilot a ship equipped with missiles, bombs, and a shield, all of which can be upgraded. As you pass through the levels, certain special enemies will appear on screen, and if they're shot, they will produce a red for missiles, blue for shields, or green for bombs power-up that can be used to charge up your ship. Collect 8 of a color, and that aspect of your ship will level up, and more importantly, if you're playing as Proco, will never go below that level, even if your ship is destroyed. This is part of what I was referring to earlier in the difference in game modes between Proco and TI. Proco represents the game's normal difficulty mode, which involves the player losing all accumulated power-ups unless the level-ups have been achieved. For instance, say you're playing as Proco, and you collect 13 missile power-ups before dying. Well, first, congratulations, because this game is pretty hard and it took some skill, as you probably made it to the 3rd level before dying. But when you do die, those first 8 power-ups will lock you into the 2nd level of Missile, which actually turns your missiles into lasers, but you'll lose the next 5 and have to try to re-earn them. If you choose to play as TI instead, you will never lose power-ups, and in that scenario, after your ship is blown up, you will return to action with 13 collected power-ups. TI's weapons are also a little more powerful than Proco's, or the enemies are weaker, take your pick, and those combined are why playing as TI is referred to as easy mode. TI's high scores aren't available for logging into the high score list either, only Proco, so if you care about that sort of thing, it's time to start practicing. Darius also has a very interesting non-linear game path. Similar to Outrun, when you complete a level in Darius, you're given 2 choices to proceed, which works your way through a ladder of game levels. With a total of 26 levels overall, 2 levels are repeated in the 7th run of the ladder to fill out the 27th and 28th slots, giving the game 5 possible endings, with multiple ways to get to those final levels. Also, while some levels share environments and aesthetics, no 2 are the same, so trying to see all 26 levels and complete all 5 endings grants tons of replay value, especially now with the mini version edition, with 15 additional bosses to the original 11. So now that all levels A through Z have unique bosses to take down. The graphics and sound in Darius are nothing short of spectacular, and both are among the best available for the Genesis. The animation is smooth, the screens have plenty of colors and details. I especially like the random lightning strikes in the outdoor levels. And even with tons of different enemies and projectiles on the screen, I experienced no slowdown or flickering. Also, each of the bosses are large and imposing, with very unique anime-inspired looks. The music is some of the best I've heard on a cartridge from the Genesis, and it wouldn't surprise me if a good portion of the 32 megabits in the ROM is dedicated to decent quality waveforms needed to produce good quality FM synthesis on the system. It's not going to replace Lightning Force or Streets of Rage 2 as far as the best soundtracks on the system are concerned for me, but I could definitely see this as being in the top 20 or top 10 of soundtracks before all is said and done. And again, I have to say it, I didn't notice any delay on the audio when playing the game. Maybe that's just because I was too busy not trying to get blown up and dodge tons of projectiles, but it's just a non-issue for me. Darius gets 4 stars from me, and it might have been into the hallowed 5-star range had it been slightly easier. Seriously, no continues? But I guess you could always abuse the save state functionality provided by the Mini if you wanted to. While I wouldn't say it's worth buying a Mini for alone, I will say that on a console packed with many other classics, Darius fits right in with the rest. Okay, so that's been a look at the new games that were released on the Mini, and a quick overview of the console in general. I think the Genesis Mini is definitely the new standard for these mini consoles, and I'll be excited to see how the TurboGrafx Mini compares when it's released. It'll definitely be nice to have a legal copy of Splatterhouse to go along with 2 and 3 on the Genesis. Tune in next week where we go back to a game for the real Genesis. Which one? I don't know, I haven't decided yet. It'll just have to be a surprise for all of us, I guess. Remember, whatever you play, have fun, and be excellent to each other. Later.